Here we go.
Bang.
I'll tell you what, there's not a guy who flies more in the world than this guy I'm talking to right now. He and I were in Miami yesterday. He'd just gotten in, and now he's back in Puerto Rico. Here we go. I mean, it's something special.
Yeah, it's something special, all right. By the way, Jared Glant, Pete, Grant Cardone's right-hand person.
Yes.
That Pete and I met with yesterday, along with Grant Cardone. It was fabulous. Jared was at the airport this morning. So we both checked into the American Lounge, Pete, because apparently Grant's not going out to Scottsdale till tomorrow. So Jared didn't get to hitch a ride on the corporate 10X jet.
That's a mistake.
So he had to fly with me and the chickens and goats. We were going opposite directions, but you guys get the idea. You got luxury, which is private jet. You've got, the cattle car, which I don't care who you are, folks. It's a cattle car. Even if you're in the best seat in the plane, Pete, in first class, you got a million people that either don't speak English or pretend they don't speak English, jumping up in line to be lined up first. And then he'll say, okay, our highest level flyers, come on now. And you got guys that barely have shoes that are standing up there in line. Not that they couldn't buy a first class ticket, but the likelihood of them being a first class flyer, Pete, is about like that. About like that. Yeah. So then they just kind of stand there in the line. And eventually, if the American, United, Delta, JetBlue, whoever you happen to be flying person has any sense, they'll say, will you people get out of the line so that we can board the plane the way we're supposed to? I know this is a strange concept to many of you, but if you're in group one, you board when I call group one. If you're in group two, well, you board when I say group 7, I guess. Nobody's listening. They don't know what the hell's going on, Pete. Like I say, so much easier whenever I jump on the corporate and just fly that way versus I don't care who it is, Pete. They all screw it up.
We had a good experience is what you're saying.
Today I did. I only had to fight my way through about 3 people that literally, Pete, went all the way up in the first class line, because at least with American, they do line 1, line 2. At Southwest even, last week I had to fly Southwest. They have Group A, 0 through 30. Group B, 30 through 60 or whatever, that kind of stuff. Anyway, we got more things to talk about than that, folks.
Let's get it.
So, episode 279 in the books. Thank you for joining us. I'm John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian, and Jared is handling all the graphics, the sponsorship stuff, the dancing bears. And there are dancing bears today, Pete, because we went from a positive to a negative like that. Yeah. So let's talk about Macro Minute, which was how much more gas does the market have in the tank? And my answer would be, I think we just ran out.
Well, I don't know that necessarily that's true, John, but I would say that on another note, I think it's interesting because when the Fed speaks, the Fed definitely can move the markets one way or the other. Oftentimes it's to the downside, but every once in a while it's to the upside as well. And I think the fact that we're hearing from various Fed speakers, and including the fact that Mester's going to leave, so who's going to replace her? There's a lot going on from the Fed, a lot of commentary. And obviously we know what happened recently when they decided to pause. And by the way, I look today, they're looking at another about 90% pause once again, John, as of right now.
December.
We'll see. That's off into December.
Yep. So in other words, if you're betting on a rate hike, folks, in December, you're in the 10% crowd, not the 90% majority. All right. What about fantastic futures?
Fantastic futures.
So I'm going to steal one from Pete, folks. And Pete has been talking about the VIX. And the VIX was down 40% since this rally started. You can check it out. VIX peaked at about 23 during the regular session, 24 in the pre-market and so forth. But let's say 23, Pete, and got down to 14 this morning. Well, that's a 40% drop. Do you think the market's less risky after we've rallied for 8 straight days, Pete, or more risky?
I would say that it'll be interesting to see if that volatility stays in this 14 and for how long, right? I mean, that was dramatic. You and I both been talking about that with each other and so forth. I'm going to give you something that I don't go in this direction very often, but how about the 30-year mortgage? The plummeting, it just dropped like it's never dropped in quite some time in terms of the velocity of that drop, John, back down to 760. It was pretty interesting. Took 16 months, it had been climbing and this, that, and the other, and everybody was getting more and more nervous. Well, now we're finally starting to see at least some relief. I'm not saying this is great relief because it's still a high number, relatively speaking, but nonetheless, it has come down at a pace like we haven't seen in quite some time. Definitely something to think about, because I think you'll start seeing, at least in the short term, some of those numbers start to elevate up. Now, they're not going to be great year over year, probably numbers, but nonetheless, I think some of those numbers in terms of buyers coming in is going to get a little bit of a catalyst from the fact that these numbers have come down.
Yep, and they sure have, Pete. And people that were patiently waiting are being rewarded for their patience now.
Yep.
All right, folks, we have to give a tip of the hat to a sponsor of the program. That sponsor is Mode Mobile. Mode has a very unique offering, Pete. I met with the CEO, the guy that created this. He's a very smart young guy. I mean, I think he's barely 35, Pete, but he's already at the helm of a company that's going to be a big winner, I think. Now, I'm saying that, folks, as a paid spokesperson for them. So this is me disclosing that to you. I am a shareholder, and I do believe in this company. And Mode Mobile is out there, as you see on the screen there, $150 million. These guys do an awful lot. You might say, what does Mode do? Look at those partnerships, Pete. Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon. What do? They give you a phone, or you can go buy one, your choice. And it's very, very similar to the iPhone. Most of us couldn't tell the difference, except that it is, of course, an Android, because only Apple can make the Apple product. But here's the unique thing, Pete. You earn for watching things on that phone. In other words, if you're willing to give them your data, which every other phone company just takes your data. They don't ask you. They just take it, and then they sell it to the highest bidder. Well, Mode lets you get into the middle between the buyer and your data and says, okay, well, if you're willing to share some of that data, all of that data even, we will compensate you in such a way that maybe your data plan every month is free. Maybe you can even make money walking around with that phone in your pocket instead of paying. I know what we pay, Pete, in my household, because I've got, 4 iPhone users, myself, my wife, my 2 daughters. We probably pay $300, $350 a month. Now, I know if you go to some places, you can cut that down a little, but I don't know of a place other than Mode that you can actually make money walking around with that phone, Pete. And again, it's your data. It's not just like they're streaming ads to your phone all day. It's where did you go? What were you looking for when you looked to buy something? Where did you look to buy it and so forth? That's all data that the phone companies sell after they've charged you for the privilege. So at least these guys are saying, you know what? You want to earn your way out of it? We'll say your data is yours, and if you're willing to share it, we'll pay you for it. And it takes down the cost of your data plan. And like I say, some people, it even takes them to the point where they're making money walking around with that phone. Check it out, Mode Mobile, folks. When I looked so far, we've helped them raise $4.2 million. If you go to mobile.com, you'll see exactly what they're doing. It's known as crowdfunding, and you can buy as little as just, $25 worth of stock, or you can buy a lot. Again, 4.2 million. They've only got, I think, one more week before they close this round of financing. So go to invest.modemobile.com. Check it out. All right, Pete, let's dive into the rest of the Rebel's Edge with Take-Two Interactive. And I love this one because stock was up. It's up because of Grand Theft Auto 6. But you know what? Just 2 days ago, Pete, we had unusual option activity. And you and I both know when we see unusual option activity and actually trade on it like this, there you see it, folks, where the stock was and where it has gone to since. Because if you want to pull it up and say, well, I wonder where, for instance, TTWO is today. Let me get you a hot quote right now. TTWO is, well, it's going a little slow, I guess, over here in Puerto Rico, Pete. TTWO, sorry about that. Not terribly slow, but 145.54. Not bad. In other words, you made a pretty good amount of money on the calls if you bought them, Pete.
That's why we call it unusual option activity. Something is there, it's unusual, and there's a catalyst. And in this case, John, two catalysts, because the fact that they've got earnings coming out, but on top of that, it's all of this excitement over Grand Theft Auto #6, which has been an unbelievable franchise, and we all know it. It's been incredible. I think when you do look at the earnings, there might be some concerns, along the way. But that being said, you look at the 52-week low and high. The low was somewhere closer to 92. The high was up at 153, and here we are today. It hit 148. So now it's 145, as you were just saying, John. But it's what we love about the unusual option activity is you don't always know the catalysts. Some of the catalysts, of course, like earnings and so forth, are right in front of us, and we know those dates. We know when they're going to happen. But in this case, Grand Theft Auto, I think it's a nice little boost. Now, what are they going to do with earnings? And that's why I think you and I talk about discipline all the time. This would be one of those situations where discipline should definitely come in. Probably would be if you've already had some substantial gains in there. Might want to trim a little something else and then see what happens with earnings. But nonetheless, it's a heck of a nice move to the upside today in a really short period of time from that last unusual option activity that we'd seen.
Yeah, just 2 days ago, folks.
2 days.
And, I'm what would I do if I were in your shoes, folks? Again, not advice, but what I would do: sell 75% of my position and ride 25% into the earnings. Maybe they're great and the stock pops more, but the stock had a nice double-digit gain this morning. It's now only up about 6%. So if you have discipline, that means you take money off the table when you can, not when you have to. All right, Upstart, Pete, UPST. This went down 26% all day. I mean, it literally opened down hard and just kept going. They reported a loss of 5 cents. They were only expected to lose 2 cents. So that's not good. Revenue was 134 mil versus 140. That's not good. And then they guided light. So that's the trifecta of bad for this company today.
And they really reached in every single one of those pockets that you're just talking about, John. It's absolutely incredible. It couldn't have gone too much worse, I can't think. Although maybe there's something I'm missing. But yeah, you look at where the stock is now and where it's come from and what the ranges looked like. It's a lot closer to that 52-week low. It's not on the lows by any stretch, but it's certainly gotten itself a lot closer, especially with the 26% move to the downside today. Growth slowing. That's not good. You get free cash burn. Well, that's not good either because you're looking for free cash flow. But when you see the burn that they've got, John, they have monstrous amounts of short interest here. So somebody has actually done very, very well by staying short in this particular name. And so that I find pretty interesting as well. But like you said, you add up the fact that, okay, you miss on earnings, you miss on revenue, you miss this, you miss that, and you guide, and you miss on the guidance that you're putting out there. This is one that I would say is definitely not only a no touch right now today, but probably a no touch for a little while. This is definitely one of those where I think it's a 3-day rule. In this case, it might be a 30-day rule where you're going to wait and see if there's any kind of changes, something that gets them to maybe get over that hump. But right now, this would be one that I would definitely stay away from right now.
Yeah, it's a rare event when you miss on all three. Usually you can get at least one of them right. Top line, bottom line, or guidance. And in this case, all three were bad. So I agree with Pete. All right, let's take a look at one that might be all three good, Pete. And that was Upwork. Now, if you've heard of Fiverr or any of the sites that basically hook up people that can do work for your company and the company. But this isn't a hiring site. So this isn't Dice, this isn't Indeed or any of those. But instead, if you needed to contract out some work and you saw somebody on this site, Upwork, that might be somebody that you hire to do that specific task without bringing them in and putting them under your HR and all the rest of that. Anyway, up 20% today, Pete. They basically beat on top line. They're expected to lose 3 cents. They came in at a 21-cent gain. Revenue also beat, and they raised guidance. So this is the polar opposite of Upstart, because they beat top line, bottom line, and they guided. That's why they're up 20%. The other companies down hard.
Yeah, and it's ironic, John, because in the report they actually used the expression from the man that we were just with yesterday, Cardone. They said they had a 10x on their average monthly visitors since their launch. 10x. That doesn't sound so bad. Revenue up about 11%. They're doing a lot of things right. As you mentioned, the earnings, their revenue crushed, and then they raised the guidance. But also, how about the fact they bought $100 million worth of stock back as well, or at least put that in there to buy back. So when you've got the buybacks and you've got the guidance, it's no longer just the triple of the 3 we talked about. The buyback's just that cherry on top, and that's number 4. You get all 4, and you get all 4 right, you get a move. The stock was up as much as 24% early, but now, as you pointed out, I think it's about 20%, whatever. In any case, it's a stock that's making a heck of a move to the upside for all the right reasons. It's just, this is their time, and they're executing to perfection right now.
Yes, I have to agree. And I think if you're holding this one, you hold on to it. Although if you did it for a trade, you probably take some off in this one too. All right, Roblox, Pete. Here's another one. We've had 2 of them in recent work on the market rebellion side. This one also had unusual option activity. And what do? Well, Roblox came up and said, you know what? They reported 70.2 million daily active users. That was up 20% year over year. They reported great numbers across the board. They say they're entering a new phase where they can slow the capital spending, CapEx, as well as operating expenses, take those down. Again, Pete just talked about 4 things you can do. These guys just did 5. Maybe 6. Yeah,
it's
they're
a 5x. 5x. And take 2 was a 6x, actually. Anyway, because it's right, Grand Theft Auto 6. Anyway,
sure.
Going back to this one, Roblox, John, nice big move to the upside. Stocks trading, it got up north of 42, not that far away from the 52-week highs of a little over 47. But to your point, your daily active users up 20% year over year. That's pretty damn impressive. But then on top of that, you follow it up with your bookings are up 20% year over year. That's not so bad either. Then you talk about the hours of engagement up 20% as well. They literally, to your point, they have knocked it out of the park in any metric and every metric that was there. And because of that, this would be one of those that, yeah, it's made a heck of a move to the upside. You might want to trim a little bit if you have some ownership, in my opinion. That's the way I would focus on it. That being said, they didn't give you any reasons necessarily to sell, though. So you might trim out of discipline, but this one right now, this is the moment for them, and they seem to be doing just about everything. Again, similar to some of the others we've talked about, pretty daggone close to perfection, like you were pointing out, John.
Yeah, this is a fabulous report. Again, congrats to everybody who's got a little piece of this one. All right, Pete, what do you got on your Pete's Red Zone Sports today?
All right, NFL. Now, we had our first firing. We've talked about it already because it happened just not too terribly long ago. And then the interim coach comes in, and all of a sudden the Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, actually look like the old days of the Oakland Raiders, Super Bowl Raiders. That's what they looked like. That was one game, so you don't want to get overdone. It's very much like the quarterback that the Vikings picked up. He played an unbelievable game, Joshua Dobbs. Great guy. The guy's this engineer, and he's a brilliant guy, and he's in astrospace, all this kind of crazy stuff. Had a great game against Atlanta. But nonetheless, you got to give him his props. He had a great game. but you look at the body of work and you go, well, not so great. He's been in the NFL for 4 years, pretty much throws almost as many interceptions as he does touchdowns. So, the jury's still out, so to speak. I mean, I think you'd have to wait. You're not going to judge it all off of one game. If you do, oftentimes that bites you. But where I'm going with this is here, John. Who else is going to get fired maybe during the season? And I think it will happen during the season. But who else in the NFL is going to get fired and should be fired probably before the end of the year? And at the end of the year, maybe they go, you know what? It's been another absolute horse crap year. You're out, and we're going to have to move on. I'm going to give you a short list, okay? Bill Belichick. Now, everybody can say, well, but Bill Belichick, he's got 6 Super Bowl titles. He's considered one of the greatest quarterback or coaches of all time. That's with Tom Brady, guys. And Tom Brady did it in another place where the coach is right now on the potential for outs down in Tampa. I mean, Todd Bowles, what has he done? Well, he's won 24 games and lost 40 with the Jets. He's been 11-13 so far with the Buccaneers. That's not so good. Belichick, post Brady, he's 27-31. So you start looking around, I'd say Belichick, he runs the whole thing. So he can't even blame the GM, John. He does the drafting. He does absolutely everything. And I say all this as a guy who really does. I like Bill Belichick. I like his style. I like the fact that he's kind of smug and sour and all the things that he is. I think it makes his personality very kind of fun for those of us who kind of like those guys who are a little bit off like that. But your coach in Chicago, it's short, but he's got 5 wins and 20 losses, John. I know it's only 2 seasons, but at some point, they're going to have to get tired of that too, because they did it in the offseason with free agents. They did it in the draft. And Ron Rivera, another one, Washington. He hasn't done very well. He had that one run at Carolina. He had a decent run for a period of years at Carolina. But, he gets to Washington. He's 25-32. So who do you think is the name that goes first? They got the guys from the Charger. The Charger head coach is another one where I think they're looking at what the team looks like and what they've produced, which has been nothing. So I think that's the frustration there. But he's brought them to the playoffs. He's done things that the previous coaches hadn't done. But what do you think? I mean, is Belichick, if you're the owner, if you're sitting there and you're not in some sort of a pull place, massage place, what do you think? Would you fire him, or what do you do with Bill Belichick?
It's known as a rub and tug.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to go there.
Well, while he's contemplating that, I think he probably really likes Mr. Belichick, Pete.
Yep.
And he's still filling up that stadium. So I don't know that the gun's to his head as much as it is to Eberflus or Foss, whatever, with the Chicago Bears, because the Bears are looking to move from Soldier Field. They bought a big place at the Arlington racetrack. If you remember when you lived in Chicago, Pete, yep. They basically bought out there, and they're going to build their own multi-billion-dollar stadium out there, apparently. And, quite frankly, I'd welcome it, because Soldier Field should have never been changed. They should have never dropped that, spaceship into it. Just kept it around for, the war memorial that it was, and let somebody else who liked it the way it was play there. Don't spend $750 million, probably closer to $1 billion, on doing what they did there. But anyway, and the traffic pattern is horrible, all the rest. So I think they might need to make a move, Pete, because they got to get the fans back backing the Bears, because the Bears fans are about as upset as Giants and Jets fans. Brandon Staley, like you say, with the Chargers, that's one that I think probably goes, because you're only going to have Justin Herbert for a little bit, because I don't think he'll, be a long-termer if the team has the 31st ranked defense and he has to constantly go back out on the field after another team has driven down and they're always chasing points. The only team that they didn't have to do that with was the Jets, and they're pretty hapless. Zach Wilson had a horrible game. They couldn't do anything right. It's not just his fault. They have a horrible offensive line, which is probably why our buddy might wait a little bit before coming back, Pete, because he might want a few more of those offensive linemen healthy. I think you're right about Ron. Ron is likely to be on the hot seat along with Matt Eberflus from the Chicago Bears. Those would be the two that go, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it happens every year. There's always a grouping of head coaches who go, and a lot of it has to do with quarterbacks. So this brings me to my next one. How about the NFL winners? We always focus on the negative. Why not focus on the positive, right? I mean, there are some teams out there who have done amazingly well, but I'm going to point out one that I don't think everybody's really been watching close enough, John. Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans were pretty daggone awful last year, right? I mean, when you look at them, they lost 13 games. They won 3 games and they lost 13 games and tied 1 game, okay? So that put them in a good position along with some trades to go into the draft and make some moves, right? And they made some moves in free agency. They grabbed a brand new coach, a coach who was with the 49ers, but he played a number of years in the NFL, heck of a player as a linebacker. The guy was incredible. D'Amico Ryan's just a great football player, and he turned into a great coach. And I'll give you a credit here too, in terms of he somehow has figured something out. He's on the defensive side of the ball, but they went offense first. They know they needed a quarterback. The Bears took Justin Fields. They decided to go with CJ Stroud, right? Second pick in the draft. Number 3 pick in the draft, they also had. They went defense. So they've built up the defense. The defense is pretty damn good. You've got an offense that's actually able to move the ball really, really well. John, this guy right now, when you look at his numbers, and he has 14 touchdowns, you know how many interceptions he has? One. This is a rookie quarterback in the NFL coming out of Ohio State. He's got 1 interception. I mean, that's what you're looking for, right? Is a guy who can contribute and change the team immediately. It's exactly what the Bears were looking for too. It just hasn't happened. Now you could say, well, it's the offensive line. It's this, it's that. I get it. But think about that for a minute with Houston. Now, Houston got pretty awful. This is a team that had some pride before, and they were in the playoffs. They had a defense. They had J.J. Watt. They had all these great players. But that's back then, and this is now. And this guy has made a turn in his first stint as a head coach, and it's really, really impressive. I can't think of any other teams, John, where I've seen this kind of a move. Now, they're only 4-4. It's not like they're blowing doors off or anything. But we also talk about the parity in the NFL. So 4-4 is pretty much the standard right now in the NFL, with a few exceptions on the positive and the negative side of that. So what do you think? I mean, am I reading too much into this, or do you think this team has they've risen, right? I mean, this is a team that I think could be kind of a scary team, not maybe this year, but maybe in the next year or two, because you get another draft, you get some more players. If they have anything close to this success, this could be a heck of a team, man.
Well, and I remember you and I talking about Will Anderson, Pete. He's their edge rush guy. He's only got 2 sacks, but that doesn't tell the whole story, of course, because this guy has more pressures than any lineman in football, Pete. That includes the Bosa brothers and so forth. So the fact that this I misspoke. Those, at least Joey Bosa, he has more than Joey, but Nick, I don't think he has more than Nick. But anyway, there's a lot of great players in there. So just to be mentioned with those 2 guys, or J.J. Watt's younger brother, is pretty flattering, I think, and deserved for Will Anderson. That's another reason the Texans are so good. The other is that David Tepper handpicked, basically the wrong guy, the wrong quarterback.
Fell in love with him.
Yeah, Bryce Young. He's too small. Can he end up being, as good as Russell Wilson was in his prime? We'll have to see. Russell was a better athlete, I think, Pete, and a more complete athlete than Bryce Young. But C.J. Stroud is the man, and he's getting the grades he deserves right now. I would say that Seattle got a pretty good pick with that D-back they took, Pete Witherspoon. I think that kid's a great corner. There'll be a bunch of them coming out this year, a bunch of great corners. And Carter from the Eagles, still another one of those guys that just stuffs the middle of that field and makes it almost impossible for you to run between the tackles. So there are some great players out there, no doubt, but I think you nailed the one. CJ Stroud is the game changer right now. They wouldn't be 4-4 if they didn't have CJ Stroud.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what they did in the draft, they got that Henry TTWO, John, the linebacker, also from Alabama. They got him all the way into the 5th round, like the 30th pick. He leads the team in tackles. So you've got him, you've got Will Anderson, then you get a wide receiver that's your number 2 wide receiver on your ball club. He's the go-to guy for CJ Stroud. I mean, they really did everything you'd ever imagine, in top to bottom, not just those first 2 picks, but even the picks below there, where you're looking at it going, well, why don't they? I look at the Minnesota Vikings, a great example, and I look at who they take in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, as you get deeper. And there are great players out there, and this proves it. I mean, you've got players that are starting in the NFL, which is an amazing feat, as rookies, and that just tells you just how good those guys really are, that they're in that position. So I'll tell you what, the combination of the GM, and give the head coach a lot of credit as well, but that team has made some huge strides forward, I think, to be a great team this year.
Yeah, I agree. They're an exciting team to watch. Those guys and Pete, Jacksonville Jaguars, I've enjoyed watching both. And both have young quarterbacks. I mean, I know Lawrence isn't a rookie, far from it. He's 3rd year, I think. But that kid's playing and leading that team much like CJ Stroud leads the Texans. It's fun to watch young quarterbacks develop. And Stroud is developing really fast. He looks like he's already been in the league a couple of years.
And it shows you also, John, how much a coach can make a difference. Because look at what Doug Peterson's done since he got down there with Trevor Lawrence versus – how it was going before with that buffoon from Ohio State. No, we're not even going to say his name. But, the guy doesn't even deserve – the guy's on TV still, John. I don't know how on God's earth they decided that after some of the things of the reasons why he was pushed out. But, he just didn't coach that team, and he didn't coach Trevor. And now all of a sudden he's got a coach in Doug Peterson, and he's having a great year. And they're probably one of the more dominant teams in the NFL right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in. We hope you tune in again tomorrow for our final Rebels Edge of the week. Comes your way at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And remember, you can go to invest.modemobile to learn more about that sponsor and what they're doing with this crowdfunding. Pretty exciting stuff. See you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, folks. Bang.